A group of adventurers is walking along a road that winds its way through the lonely hills of Asbar. Rounding a bend, they spot a raggedy old man sitting beneath the sparse shade of a gnarled tree. The group wonders to themselves, what sort of person would be out here all alone in this desolate wilderness? As they approach, the old man greets them cheerfully, offering them a drink from his flask of wine and asking only if they might spare a bit of food for a hungry old traveler. The group collectively hesitates, remembering the time on the Isle of Lindoth when they encountered a young girl along its rocky shoreline, accepted her offer of victuals, and almost lost a member to the draining kiss of a succubus. Or when they tried to help a farmer in the moors of Gilganthor, searching for his lost daughter, only to realize that he was the vengeful spirit of a serial killer looking for new victims. This time, the adventurers decided that caution was the better part of valor, and they informed the old man that unfortunately they were in a hurry. They had a mission that they must get to. And in fact, this was true. The group was heading to the keep of Moldinia to help her fight off a marauding band of gnolls. And as they moved just out of sight, the elven ranger in the group glanced back and saw the old man transformed into a huge golden lizard. A gold dragon rose into the air and swooped low over the group, and in a loud voice told them, "It is wise to help those that are weaker than you." And as the dragon winged away, one of the adventurers cursed their caution, noting that the gold dragon would have made an excellent ally against the gnolls. Then another adventurer wondered, why is it that we never just run into an old man alone in the wilderness? To which the other adventurers laughed. "Because, you fool, we are not in the real world where people wander about by themselves. We are in the realm of the D&D cliché." Hello again, KR King here, helping you homebrew your own campaign. So today I'm going to continue my series on D&D cliches, and today I'm covering the topic of the solo NPC, or more specifically, the cliche of the solo humanoid or creature that you encounter who is not what they appear. And this cliche is kind of interesting to me because it shows how the tropes and techniques of classic storytelling can bump up against the mechanics of D&D. Because the Soul Wanderer is an integral part of the literature that makes up the lore of D&D. Think about Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, Conan the Barbarian, who wanders through the books and stories of those sagas, Carl Edward Wagner's, Kane the Immortal Wanderer in his books. Now, of course, if you translate those literary characters into a D&D setting, they are going to be very high level. Hence the reaction of players when they encounter the raggedy old man or slight young girl or whatever out alone in the wilderness. Or more specifically, ones that claim they are just a simple old man or young girl. Experienced players don't believe it. But today I'm going to give you some ideas on creating solo NPCs and creatures which kind of go against the cliches and help you, develop some ideas in terms of storytelling. Another thing it does is it keeps the players on their toes. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and an NPC, simple humanoid wandering the wilderness is just that, so long as their story holds up. And the great thing about a truly helpless NPC or creature that the players just run across in the middle of the wilderness is their chances of survival aren't very good, so they're just, whatever happened to them just happened. And this dovetails into the storytelling truism that you want to get into the action just as it's happening, just as things are getting intense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover three aspects of running into, solo or small groups of NPCs or creatures that don't make sense in terms of the setting, in terms of their survivability. And like I said, typically this is one creature, but it can be two or three, as you'll see. So the first is the truly helpless NPC who is telling the players the truth, exactly who they are. And the second is a truly helpless NPC or creature, but they're not really telling the players the truth about the circumstances of how they got there. And the final one is the classic, solo NPC that is not who they say they are. And the idea here is to put a twist on it to make it not the cliched creature, but something with an interesting storyline such that it makes sense why this creature would be, in disguise or not revealing who they really are. All right, so when you have a pretty much, helpless, a low-level, NPC or creature wandering alone in the wilderness or in a small group, the classic storytelling questions are how and why. How did they get here and why did they come? And an important how is how far are you from the edges of civilization, a safe area? If you're at the very edge of a civilization, just a few miles outside of a town, it can be a very dangerous place. But it's reasonable that certain townspeople might in fact forage for things, a little ways out from town. So it's really important to unpack the notion of, an NPC that is helpless. So I'll create a commoner. He's a lumberjack. His name is Janus. Now, he doesn't stand much chance in a battle against a single orc or a trained fighter. But Janus isn't helpless. He's a strong guy. He knows how to use his fist. He has some ideas on how to survive. He may know what plants are edible if he gets lost in the woods. He may be able to detect if creatures are nearby. He may be able to set traps, feed himself, this kind of thing. So it's conceivable that Janus would wander farther from town than the average person. Let's say he's searching for a particular tree to cut down. So he's out in the woods where the players are wandering. They stumble across him. Now you can mix things up. Janus might be more of a woodsman. He might even be a prototype sort of ranger, first level or zero level, whatever you want to say. So he may hear the players coming and hide from them. The players may only notice him on a passive perception check, may not notice him at all. Or you can mix it up further. Janus might be injured. Perhaps the tree he was working on fell on him and he's trapped out there. The players might merely stumble across him as they're going, or he may have a companion, say a dog, that seeing that he's trapped here runs off, gets the players' attention and leads them back to Janus. So if the players rescue Janus from this predicament, they take him back to town, he may give them story treasure, which, as with a lot of things I mentioned in an earlier video. Janus has detailed information about these woods because he goes out here all the time. He may have seen a group of men or humanoids, digging at some old riverbed. Or he may have noticed a sinkhole which just recently opened up in the woods. And far below he can hear the sound of rushing water. You think players are going to be able to resist that? I don't think so. So the point is, near a town or village, say if your hex is 5 miles or whatever, it's reasonable that you could have townspeople wandering by themselves. That is, if you create a story for why they're there that has verisimilitude. A sister and brother who fled an abusive household, an old man who wanders out to a sacred pool to remember his wife once per year, or an ancient elf that comes to a great tree as she is preparing to pass on to the next world. And notice how each of these, helpless NPCs has a hook to a storyline that the players can get involved with. And it doesn't have to be just human. It can be a humanoid, an orc child that has fled from an abusive household, or, her father is about to preparing an attack on an innocent settlement. Now, as you get farther out into the wilderness or underground, the believability of a helpless NPC just wandering around becomes a little strained unless you create a reasonable storyline. The sole survivor of a trade caravan who was just recently attacked, and when did this happen and where did they go? Or perhaps an old man on a wagon train of settlers who just couldn't take walking anymore. He just said, I'm sitting down here, I'm not going anywhere, which is a true story from the old Donner Party. So the next category of the helpless solo NPC are the ones who are exactly who they say they are, but are withholding some crucial bit of information from the players. So to use our earlier examples, the lumberjack Janus wasn't really looking for a certain tree. He had found a treasure map and was searching for a geographic location that's identified. He doesn't want to tell the players this. Or he's in trouble. His only child was kidnapped by a hag who has promised to release the child if Janus can lure more lucrative victims, i.e. the player characters, into her clutches. Now, in both of those cases, the players may discover what Janus is up to. He may decide to tell them if he thinks, hey, we can split this treasure, or hey, you are the people that might help me rescue my child from the hag. He may not trust her. Or the players might just move on from Janus. Oh, okay, you're searching for a tree, good for you. Or they may be fooled by him and go and get into an encounter with the hag. So the two children who claim they're running away from an abusive household may in fact be street urchins who stole from a rich merchant and are on the run, and the merchant's out to get them. Or they stole magic from a wizard, again, out to get them. Or the children may have a sibling held by the same hag that we talked about with Janus, so they're out to lure someone to rescue their sibling. You know, the orc child may have actually killed someone in the tribe, maybe for good reason, but now they're exiled. Or she may have a darker secret. She comes to this spot because in this pool a voice calls to her, all we need is a human sacrifice. You get the idea here. And when you're out in the middle of nowhere, the same thing applies. You could have the sole survivor of a caravan, but in fact they betrayed the caravan to bandits who slaughtered everyone, and then they ran away when they realized, oh, I'm next. You know, the old man may not have simply sat down, I can't go anymore. He may have realized that the leader of the caravan was an evil cultist. This is where story makes such a difference when you're running a campaign in D&D. You know, you scale the stats up and down depending on the levels of your players, and that's what makes battles fun, you know, right at the edge. But it's the storylines that always differentiate creatures from like creatures. Because then you have the classic, you know, helpless solo NPC or creature who is not what they seem, and in fact they are much more powerful and potentially threatening to the players. You know, and this can be fun to unleash on the players after they've encountered a few, you know, helpless NPCs that are in fact exactly what they say they are. You never know, the players could get a little sloppy in terms of investigating. Oh, okay, it really is an old man, but you know, and then he turns out to be some shape changer. What you want to do if you're going to use the standard, let's say, shape changing sort of creature, is to think of storylines that make it a little more interesting. You know, the lumberjack Janus might just be the standard, you know, incubus out to corrupt souls. But what if they're the offspring of an incubus and human, in which the infernal curse might actually be broken? And if the players do something, and again, the incubus might reveal this, there might be some tome nearby, some information, and they're freed from this curse, now you have a new creature in your world, a potential ally, and of course, linkages to other storylines. So the children on the run could be doppelgangers, who use the sympathy they engender as children alone in the forest, you know, to lure people in, let their guard down, and then attack. But, you know, think of a storyline that's more interesting. Why are these doppelgangers out in the wilderness where they might not meet so many people, right? Not in some city where you would expect doppelgangers. Maybe they wandered out here, you know, with some group or whatever, and they found, you know, the Pool of Whispers, which speaks to them at night and somehow keeps them here. What's the Pool of Whispers? That's for you to decide. And that's the beauty of taking these cliches and bending them into new shapes with story ideas. It's taking the reason they became cliches, the truth behind them, but eliminating the sort of, you know, poor exposition that makes them into hackneyed, you know, ideas. So I would encourage you to create some solo, you know, seemingly or really helpless NPCs, and then add a twist with the storyline. I would love to hear about them. I always answer my comments. And if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always looking for more. Most of all, my friends, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.